My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I love Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And I am publishing a series of videos exploring the reasons why I am such a fan of Zack Snyder's film. In this series, you'll find my thoughts on topics that matter to me, like Larry Fong's cinematography, character analysis on Lex Luthor and Lois Lane, the Christian imagery, what I find hopeful about the movie, and yes, I'll address the critical reception. So if you're interested in any of those topics, I hope you will get something out of this series and find out why Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice has had such a profound, heartfelt, and inspiring impact on my life. Welcome to the Duck Milk Prod YouTube channel. My name is Rebecca Johnson, and this live stream is part of a series I am calling Reading Reviews with Rebecca, which will analyze the critical reception of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice through the lens of 38 of the negative reviews written by top critics from Rotten Tomatoes, one review at a time. So it's a little bit of a commitment, but I'm willing to do it. So that is what we're going to be doing here every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern, unless I have a conflict and I'm going somewhere. But I will schedule the live streams in advance so people will know when to expect one. So in terms of the format and what we're going to do here, this is not meant to belittle anyone's opinions. The reviewers who wrote these reviews have every right to have their opinion, just like I do. But this is actually rather to serve as a study of art criticism and an examination into how we discuss film. And I'm hoping that by the end of this, by the end of 38 weeks and then 39 with a wrap-up video that I'm going to do, I'm hoping that this endeavor will encourage us all to be better consumers of cinema. So hopefully that's the goal in mind. And today I'll be reading through a review from The Atlantic titled, quote, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Rubbish, unquote, written by Christopher Orr. And the link to his review is in the video description. If you'd like to follow along and read it for yourself, I encourage you to do so. I know some fans don't want to give them clicks, but it's important that you know this is real. This is not something I'm making up. I'm not putting any words into anyone's mouth. This is the actual review written by the reviewer. And I've also linked his Christopher Orr's Man of Steel review in the video description, because we'll be taking a look at that as well. That becomes relevant in his review for Batman v Superman. And if Christopher Orr should ever see this video, I just want to say that I'm aiming to do this as civilly and analytically as possible. And I would ask that anyone watching live in the chat or posting in the comments would do the same. Be respectful of everyone's opinion, even if you disagree. My goal is to take a look at the criticism for and of BVS now from an historical point of view after so many years, given that these reviews were written by Warner Brothers in their decision-making, they were used by Warner Brothers in their decision-making process regarding the DC Extended Universe. Of course, you know, history tells us that due to the poor reviews for Batman v Superman, the tone and approach to the franchise were changed for Justice League, and ultimately led to sadly, to the destruction of the Snyderverse. So it's very important in terms of the historical context of the DCEU. So before I get into Christopher Orr's thoughts, I'm sure there are some people viewing this who might think, hey, Christopher Orr is a film critic for a major news outlet. Who cares what you have to say, Rebecca? So I think that's fair. That's a fair question. I would be asking it myself. So in case that's you, I wanted to just have a little rundown of me and my experience. So hopefully that will let people know that I do have some experience talking about these things. So here's a little background on me. I graduated from the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, with a degree in telecommunications and film and a focus on broadcast television production. While I've never been to film school, in my television and production experience, I've learned about and have lots of practice in operating cameras, shot composition, and editing. Lighting, green screen, and audio are my weak spots, admittedly, but I've been working on those. After working in local TV news, running cameras, and working in production, I got a job at Turner, now Warner Media, or whatever they're calling themselves now, for 14 years. I worked with networks, or brands as they call them now, like TBS, TNT, Adult Swim, Cartoon Network, Boomerang, True TV, and Turner Classic Movies as a video encoding specialist. I also did a fair amount of closed captioning work and DVD and Blu-ray QC. In case you are wondering how I podcasted about Supergirl and the DCEU films while working for a Time Warner company, I actually got permission and clearance from my human resources representative. If you think I wouldn't criticize stories that were under the same corporate umbrella, that was never a problem nor a concern for me. If I thought the Supergirl TV series or a DCEU film had faults, I said so. In the last 17 years, I have served as a director, technical director, and camera operator at my local church in a live production capacity. I've been a video editor for 17 years, having worked in Avid, Final Cut, and Premiere Pro CC. In my day job, I shoot and edit news and documentary-style video content that involves interviews and narrative storytelling. I'm also currently an amateur photographer and am aiming to improve my efforts in still photography. You can check out my work over at Instagram at @TheDerbyKid. Link is in the video description below. While discussing these film reviews, music and film scores will inevitably come up. It may be good to know that in my life I have played piano, handbells, clarinet, bass clarinet, bassoon, acoustic guitar, and have even started learning how to play the ukulele. I've played in marching bands, symphonic bands, and wind ensembles, and have sung in many choirs. While I don't consider myself a world-class musician, far from it, actually, I do know some things about music and am a big fan of film scores and soundtracks. In addition to my production and musical experience, I have had lots of experience in art criticism. I've been podcasting about television and film since 2009 and do so on a regular basis with Supergirl Radio, a podcast I co-host about the CW Supergirl TV series. I am also a writing contributor to the Justice League Universe podcast that offers analysis on the DCEU films. You might even hear my voice occasionally in recordings and audio commentaries over there. I'm not an expert, but I care deeply about film, television, storytelling, and art. So I hope this gives you a background on where I'm coming from. All right, so now that we have all of that out of the way, let's actually get into Christopher Orr's review on Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And to those in the chat, I'll try to stop every so often and check in with you. So if you have any thoughts, please share them. If you have any questions, ask them, and I'll try to get to them. So we'll check in every so often in the chat. So the first place, I should remind everyone in the chat, if you want to look at the review yourself while we're going through this, the link is in the video description, so you can pull up Christopher Orr's review while we chat. So the first place I'd like to start with his review, in every review that we're going to be talking about Sundays at 4 p.m. Eastern, is the headline. That's always where I want to start because a lot of people will maybe just read the headline and they won't read the rest of it. So the headline is really, really important. From what I understand, the reviewers may not be crafting these headlines themselves. It may be the editor doing it, but the headline is super important. So I maybe can't point this to Christopher Orr's doing just because it may have been an editor who wrote it, but I still want to discuss it. So the headline for this review is, quote, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Rubbish, unquote. So I just have a couple questions here. Does it seem like this headline is someone making a genuine attempt to analyze a film? That's my first question. My second question is, how long do we think it took to come up with this title? 30 seconds? A minute? I'm just asking questions. Another question I have is, does it seem like clever wordplay? Is it something you wouldn't have expected and you thought, oh, that's very clever? Or my last question is, does it seem like someone's first thought? Is my question. So I don't know. I'm gonna make this interactive. So anybody watching this live, if you would like to throw out a noun fill in the blank here. We'll just see what we can do. We'll workshop it a little bit. So Batman v Superman, Dawn of, and insert it now. We'll play a little game of Mad Libs here. So if you have a better suggestion for that title based on your perspective on Batman v Superman, throw it in the chat or in the comments. Write it in the comments and let me know if you have a better suggestion for a headline. So I just wanted to start with that because it's very important we start with the headline first. So getting into the review, this is his first big paragraph. So he writes, quote, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice begins where it's 2013 DC Comics Predator. He has hyphenated DC Comics, which is, that's incorrect. But we're going to move on. DC Comics predecessor, Man of Steel, ended. The titular Kryptonian is fighting his nemesis, General Zod, over the streets of Metropolis, and in the process, laying waste to much of the city. What we didn't know before is that down there amid the rubble is the billionaire Bruce Wayne, trying with limited success to rescue workers at a local branch of Wayne Enterprises from the collateral destruction, unquote. So this is a great opening to a review. The opening paragraph is all true. These are all things that happen in the film. These are all things that you would need to know. It's very important and informative. Got lots of facts about where the timeline is and where BVS falls within it after Man of Steel. So it catches up. It catches the reader up on what we need to know before going into the story, before you watch BVS, in case we didn't see Man of Steel beforehand. So I think this is a great start to the review. I think this is something that adds some value to somebody if they hadn't watched Man of Steel. So a great opening paragraph. So that's a good way to start. So then he goes into saying, quote, there's the germ of an interesting idea here. The Man of Steel director, Zack Snyder, took a fair amount of grief for the way the movie casually depopulated an American city, however fictional. In Snyder's retelling here, Bruce Wayne, aka obviously Batman, essentially becomes the voice of those critics. Is Superman really a hero? Or is he just some alien interloper who brought his extraterrestrial vendettas to our humble planet, knocking down an entire urban skyline in the process? In the hands of another director, the Christopher Nolan of the Dark Knight movies or the Bryan Singer of the X-Men films come immediately to mind. This and other moral quandaries might have been drawn out in intriguing ways, unquote. So it's interesting to me that Orr speaks about the fair amount of grief for Man of Steel's depiction of the consequences of Kryptonians fighting each other. But you know what he doesn't mention? He doesn't mention that he is one of the people who actually dished that out. So if you would like to see his Man of Steel review, it's linked in the video description below this video so that you can follow along with that as well. So in his Man of Steel review, Orr writes, quote, inevitably, Zod and his followers announce their evil plan for the human race, and it falls to the newly christened Superman to foil it. This entails a great deal of fighting. Punches are thrown, and cars, too. Flight and heat vision get their requisite workouts, and Zod's starship levels half the skyscrapers in Manhattan, Metropolis. Either way, it's played by a combination of Chicago and Vancouver, unquote. So he does, in his review, mention the fair amount of grief for the consequences of Kryptonians fighting each other. And I don't even know if that's a joke. Did he really not know what city the Battle of Metropolis took place in? So that's a question I have. I don't know. So that's part of his Man of Steel review. So in his Batman v Superman review, I like that Christopher outlines Bruce Wayne's issues with Superman, but he never really explores this as the reviewer. Does Bruce Wayne's point of view have any validity to it? He doesn't go into that. I also wonder if he would have wanted to explore how the film depicted Clark Kent or Lois Lane or Martha Kent's response to the criticism. That's kind of a big part in the film too. To me, the film, even the theatrical release, does a great job of showing how the different characters deal with moral quandaries, as Christopher Orr describes it in his review. But Orr doesn't seem all that interested in expanding on any of this, so I'm a little confused as why he brings any of it up. I guess maybe he's sort of still outlining the plot of the movie, but it's strange that none of that's really, those are big ideas, and he doesn't really go into them. Orr also mentions Christopher Nolan in this review, which is fitting, I suppose, because his Man of Steel review, which you can, again, click in the video description, is titled Man of Steel, The Dark Knightification of Superman. So I'm a little confused with the contradictions of his thoughts. Would he have preferred Christopher Nolan to direct Batman v Superman, or did he dislike that Man of Steel felt too much like it was directed by Christopher Nolan? And why bring Christopher Nolan up at all in this Batman v Superman review? This is something that's going to be a thread throughout many of these reviews from the top critics of Rotten Tomatoes. Christopher Nolan was an executive producer on the film, but that's it. He didn't write it. He didn't direct it. He was just an executive producer. And from what I understand, he kind of was hands off mostly because he didn't want to, he had already made 3 Batman films. And since Batman was in this one, he wanted someone else to tell their Batman story. So the Christopher Nolan thing is a little strange to me that they would even bring him up other than the idea that he was an executive producer on the film. Orr also mentions Bryan Singer in his Man of Steel review, which he doesn't include in his Batman v Superman review. And in that he writes, quote, Man of Steel is pretty much by pretty much any measure a better film than Bryan Singer's 2006 reboot, Superman Returns. Better cast, better action, better script. But Singer attempted, with uneven success, to offer a different vernacular for the superhero movie and an innocent alternative to the solemnity of Nolan's Batman and his own X-Men, unquote. Orr recognizes that Snyder's Superman film is better than Singer's Superman film in almost every way, but somehow still prefers Singer because of his different vernacular. So I just have some questions about this part of the review. Is this a reference to film or visual language? Because in that case, in my opinion, Singer didn't have much of a different vernacular for Superman. The entire premise behind Superman Returns is an effort to replicate the Donnerverse. Zack Snyder and David Goyer, however, rethought Clark and Lois's relationship, the depiction of Krypton, the Fortress of Solitude, Jor-El, and Zod, among a whole list of other things, including starting fresh with Hans Zimmer's musical theme. They didn't just reuse the John Williams theme like Bryan Singer did. They started from scratch. So my question then is, so which director actually had the different vernacular for the superhero genre? So I have a lot of questions with that, trying to make some of that make sense, because it doesn't really seem to jive with it. It's contradictory thoughts, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Let's see. Chubby Teddy Monster Productions, love that name, says, I love how these critics don't really bring up Clark working to earn Superman, or they make sure to ignore that arc. Yeah, that's a great point. You'll find, as maybe I have, I'm hoping that you'll find it just as much as I do when I read these, that a lot of these reviews, and this is also something I may talk about at the very end of this series, is that there's not a lot of explanation in these reviews, which is a little bit frustrating. And I think partially it's because they don't want to spoil something, or they're afraid to do something, write something they're not supposed to. I don't know, but it's a little frustrating when they make a statement and then they don't back it up with any kind of example. So that's going to be something we're going to look at in this review as well. And I'll take some chat comments while we're here. Shah says, please make analysis on Man of Steel like you did with BBS. I might, maybe if I feel inspired. I did do a Man of Steel audio commentary with my friend Andy over the DCTV podcast YouTube channel. So you can go check that out if you would like. So that, I love Man of Steel. So if I feel like I have some time, maybe I'll do that as well if I feel inspired. Okay, so I guess we should keep going into the review. So Christopher Orr says, quote, instead, alas, we have Snyder, whose idea of a moral quandary is, should I make this scene grim or grimmer, loud or louder, violent or more violent still? This is his impersonation of Zack Snyder. Orr goes on to write, quote, it's thus no surprise that after all its early ostentatious hand-wringing, this is a very important phrase, Batman v Superman ends almost exactly as its predecessor did, with another dull city-smashing duel between super beings. The only surprise is that the movie recalls its animating premise vaguely enough to bother explaining that the neighborhood being leveled this time around is uninhabited. No harm, no foul, unquote. So, okay, lots to unpack there. So my question to that paragraph is, how does Orr know that Snyder's idea of a moral quandary is, should I make this scene grim or grimmer, louder, violent or more violent still? What is he even talking about? I don't know what he's referring to. He never describes it, doesn't give any examples. So I don't know what he's referring to with this section of the paragraph. And then I have a couple more questions outside that. Why couldn't a scene be grim? Why is that a bad thing? If the story and the scene and the character calls for it, I think it could be grim if the story calls for it. Why can't a scene be loud? Scenes can be loud or quiet depending on the tone and the scene in question. I think it's perfectly fine if a scene is loud if it calls for it. What if the scene calls for violence? We're dealing with superhero movies and good guys and bad guys. There's probably going to be some violence there. So I'm having trouble with why any of these statements that he just kind of makes up in his perspective of Zack Snyder. That I don't understand why these are criticisms. So I don't think they're actually storytelling critiques, and I guess that's what I would ask, or if I was able to ask him. And I also wonder if this would be a standard that Christopher Orr would hold across the board, or is this only when reviewing Batman v Superman? Would he have problems in another film if another film had grim scenes, or loud scenes, or violent scenes? So that's a question I have about that. All right, so let's get into ostentatious hand-wringing, which my Google Doc seems to think that hand-wringing as one word is misspelled. I guess there's maybe supposed to be a hyphen in there, but I think Christopher Orr's review actually has it as one word. So there's some hyphens in here that don't need to be, and maybe sometimes when there needs to be one. So I'm just breaking that down. So in terms of ostentatious hand-wringing, which it sounds like an awesome phrase. That sounds like a really smart thing to say. The definition of the word ostentatious is, quote, characterized by vulgar or pretentious display designed to impress or attract notice, unquote. And then if we break down the definition of hand-wringing, that means if you accuse someone of hand-wringing, you mean they are expressing sorrow about a bad situation, but are saying that they are unable to change it. So is Christopher Orr saying that BVS is unable to change a bad situation, but doing it in a pretentious way? Is that what he means by ostentatious hand-wringing? So if that's the case, how? Why are these words used specifically? I would love an example of the ostentatious hand-wringing. I would love to know more about why he thinks it is that way. And then I would want to know, how is the film, the story, or the character dilemmas pretentious? What makes them pretentious? I would love to know that. I would also like to know what is so wrong about hand-wringing in the story of BBS, given the definition. There are bad situations in it. There are characters who express sorrow about those bad situations, and they debate whether or not they can change them. So why is that a negative? Isn't that actually good drama? That seems like good drama to me. Would this be written about any other cinematic drama, any other dramatic film that would be reviewed? I just have a lot of questions about the ostentatious hand-wringing. Christopher Orr also criticizes BVS for making a move to point out that the action, making a point to move the action actually to a location that won't harm any citizens, which is confusing to me because I thought that's what he wanted. It seemed like this was a problem for him and other critics after Man of Steel. So you would think that they would be grateful about this addition to the film. I just have a problem with, mentioning as a critic, mentioning the leveling half the skyscrapers in your review, and not appreciating the small detail that the follow-up to that actually tried to correct that. So it's weird that is seen as a negative thing when that's actually something the reviewer previously had an issue with. So it's a little bit confusing to me. Let's see. We have some questions. I'll stop here. Just take some questions from the chat. Chubby Teddy Monster Productions says, Rebecca, I've always wanted to ask you, why do the critics and comic writers make it a point to hold on to Donner's Superman when his Superman is only surface Superman? That's a great question. That's a question I've been asking myself for a very long time, because Christopher Reeve's Superman, the Donnerverse Superman, was not the first Superman. There were, Kirk Allen, you had George Reeves. George Reeves was like a huge influence on a lot of people who became Superman fans or comic book writers. It was a big deal back in, I think, the 50s. So it's strange to me that there was this point in time where Christopher Reeve's Superman became the Superman. And I think a lot of it is the people, the critics who are reviewing it today, the comic book writers writing Superman today, a lot of them have a great deal of nostalgia, which I totally get. There are things I love that I've loved since I was a kid. And even if they may be laughably bad, when you look at it now, I still love them. So, not that I'm saying that about the Donnerverse movies, but I'm just saying that nostalgia can override some critical thinking skills. So I think a lot of it's just that was maybe somebody's first Superman. It was a Superman that changed their view on Superman, that he made you believe that a man could fly. So I think a lot of it is just played on the nostalgia. And I think a lot of it also is, and this is not meant to, be mean, but this is the only word I can use. But I think a lot of it stems from ignorance as well. Just the idea that they don't know anything else. They may not know anything other than the Christopher Reeve Superman. They may not have read the comics. They may not have watched Superman the animated series. They may not have seen Smallville. So if you juxtapose that one version of Superman that the only one and then you put it up against Man of Steel, it might cause you some problems. But I found, as a comic book fan, as a fan of the animated series, somebody who watched Smallville for a long time until I couldn't stand it anymore, I recognize a lot of those Supermen in Henry Cavill's Superman and the story that was told in Man of Steel. So it doesn't bother me. So I think some of it is just some ignorance and nostalgia mixed together. So that would be my guess. I don't know for sure, but that would be my guess. Let's see. Mask of Shy says, I think he should at least try to give examples. And yeah, as you say, this reviewer should at least explore why it can't be grim or how his criteria to review a movie works. That's a great point. It would be nice to know why certain reviewers hold these claims or statements as fact. Sometimes they treat it as fact instead of opinion. So it would be nice to understand, just expanding it a little bit. Like if you make a claim, go a few sentences beyond that and explain why you think the way that you do. That's what I would love. I even if it was a bad review about something I loved, I want to know more about his thoughts. So yeah, I think anytime you're reviewing something, my advice is not to just make a claim, but back it up. Have reasons for why you think the way that you do. I always try to maintain that. So that's what I would recommend to other people. And Mask of Shy says, "Oh, I know why they like to call it pretentious." Drop that explanation in the chat. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I have an idea of maybe why they think it's pretentious, but that's not necessarily the explanation from the reviewer. So I don't like to make assumptions if I can help it. All right, so let's continue on into the review. And there may be times, just FYI, during this live stream, I might have to take sips of water. So I just want to warn everybody, because I'll be doing a lot of talking. So I'm going to try to make sure my voice hangs with me. Okay, so in Orr's review, he continues on to say, quote, such thematic carelessness is on constant display, which wouldn't loom as nearly so large a problem if Snyder's film didn't advertise its aspirations to moral seriousness in almost every plotting, humorless frame. There are endless disquisitions about whether Batman is good for Gotham and Superman good for the Earth, and tedious evocations of the roles of gods and men. And he puts gods and men in quotation marks. And then he finishes out this paragraph with, yet the actual characters themselves never come to life as anything other than symbols to be clumsily bickered over, unquote. Okay, so first question in reading this paragraph, what does it mean by thematic carelessness? Now I know what those words mean. I know what thematic and what carelessness mean. I just want to know how the themes in BVS are careless. That's not explained. It's not really dug into much in this review. Apparently, it's on constant display in the film, but it doesn't seem to warrant as much discussion in the review, even though this seems to be a huge issue for Orr. So that's I would want to know more about the thematic carelessness because I think the themes in BVS are actually very well thought out and are very layered and all seem to connect with each other, which is why I think it's so well written. Is it all the ideas of, the government's looking at Superman, Batman's looking at Superman, and then there's all that gods versus men that Orr mentions in the review that's held by many characters. Lex Luthor has problems with Superman as God. Bruce Wayne has issues with Superman as God. Clark Kent doesn't even want somebody to think he's God. So there's a lot of different ideas that are woven together within the film that go through many characters' storylines. And I think that's actually really well done. So I would be curious as to know what thematic carelessness is that he's referring to. Or also mentions humorless frames, which I think is pretty unfair, actually, given that there are whole characters in Batman v Superman, namely Alfred and Perry, and Martha Kent has her moments too, who serve as comedic relief. That's one of their whole purposes, is that they go in there and say something funny. I mean, Perry White's Lawrence Fishburne's Burns Perry White, his comedic timing is impeccable. The idea that he gives Clark a hard time at work for not writing his sports articles, that's funny. So I know that there are some issues that people have with the use of humor in the film. I've taken a lot of flack for that, saying that it does have humor, which it does. But I think it's just not the quippy banter that a lot of people expect from a superhero movies these days. But there's actually a lot of humor throughout the film. So I think the humorless frame, I would say that is extremely unfair because there's actually quite a bit of comedic relief in the film. Okay, so Orr actually uses the word disquisition, which was a new word for me. I had to look it up after reading this review. So thank you, Christopher Orr, for teaching me a new word. I honestly and truthfully need to expand my vocabulary. So I'm going to try to work disquisition into my vocabulary as much as I possibly can. Okay, so in case anybody doesn't know, like I didn't, the definition of disquisition is a, quote, long or elaborate essay or discussion on a particular subject, unquote. So now knowing that definition, my question to Orr's use of it is, why are disquisitions in BVS a negative thing? Is it because Orr thinks that they are endless? Do those disquisitions not warrant some kind of further analysis, any expansion on those ideas? If a disquisition in an essay or discussion, if there is a if the definition, let me get my thought together. If a disquisition means an essay or discussion, what were the disquisitions in Batman v Superman? He talks a little bit about Batman is good for Gotham, Superman good for Earth, and gods versus men. But he didn't seem to talk about how these ideas carry thematic weight. He doesn't talk about the character journeys in the stories and how those disquisitions play into them. He doesn't really explore anything and what those things mean for those characters, and that those disquisitions are layered throughout the film in terms of biblical references, man metaphorically wrestling with God. I guess you could say he was literally, Bruce literally wrestled with a God-like character. Lex Luthor's hatred of God, the way humanity reacts to Superman's existence and ultimately his death. I don't think that's thematic carelessness at all. I think it's actually rather a strong element of the film. So I have questions about the use of thematic carelessness here. Let's see. Chubby Teddy Monster Productions says Snyder was so smart having the world and Superman at a point where they don't trust each other and that they are both trying to earn each other's trust and respect. Yeah, I think that's really cool. I think that would, that probably would be true to life if Superman actually showed up today. So I think I like the idea of exploring what that would be like if that actually did happen. And Andy says, never apologize for drinking water. So that might be my cue. I'm gonna take a break and drink some water here. Because we've got quite a bit to go. I'm hoping to get this finished in an hour. So if you have to go, feel free. But we'll see if I can get it completed within an hour. We'll see. Okay. All right. So Orr continues. He says, quote, we know, for instance, that Lex Luthor, played by Jesse Eisenberg, as a young tech magnate, hates Superman, played by Henry Cavill, primarily because we knew as much before the movie even started. And other than a kind of whiny, inchoate envy, that's all the motivation he evidently needs, unquote. So, wow. To that whole paragraph. I guess it's not so much. Well, I guess it's kind of a paragraph. It's 2 sentences. He doesn't mention at all that there's an entire monologue on the rooftop from Lex Luthor where he explains his hatred of God and why it has driven his entire storyline in the film. That's a pretty big thing to leave out. If you're going to make that claim about Lex Luthor, he explains his whole issue with Superman based on his abuse from his father and how God didn't save him. That's a big deal. So that might have been something he would have wanted to mention. You could maybe explain some of that without spoiling anything. I think you could have gone into his, Lex Luthor's whole conversation about the problem of evil. I think you could have mentioned that. But he doesn't really delve deep into that. He also uses the word inchoate, which I think is how you pronounce it. So if it's not correct, someone let me know. The definition of that word is, quote, just begun and so not fully formed or developed. You could also say it's just rudimentary, unquote. So I like the use of the word. I think that's a great pull from the thesaurus that he may have used. But I don't know that it's entirely fair when it comes to Lex Luthor. I think you missed a whole lot of context there when you made that claim. So I think that's a kind of an unfair part of the review, leaving out a lot of context on Lex Luthor's character. So now he's going to get into Lois Lane. So he says, quote, likewise, we know that Lois Lane, a thoroughly wasted Amy Adams, loves Superman because A, she keeps saying so, and B, that is her principal plot function, unquote. Wasted? Amy Adams' Lois Lane does more in BVS than any other cinematic Lois Lane in a Superman film. That's just a fact. That's just a fact. She actually investigates. She has a whole storyline where she investigates Lex Luthor and the bullet that she found in Africa. I don't agree with that at all. She has a whole character journey that falls back to the question of whether or not Superman can love her and be him at the same time. In the end, of course, he chooses to love her and be Superman by sacrificing himself to save the world. So to say that she's wasted is a disrespect, in my opinion, of Amy Adams, because she's fantastic in Batman v Superman. She's one of the best characters in the film. And he also mentions her principal plot function. Like I mentioned, she has an entire story arc investigating Lex Luthor that starts in Africa and ends with Lex Luthor in jail after she confronts him on the rooftop saying, I've proven what you've done. When she says that, how does he how does he end up in jail at the end? Maybe it's because she turned over all the evidence of the things she found when she was investigating him. So Lois Lane is you take her out of the film, it's not the same film. It's a worse film if you take her out. So she's a very important character in the film. Speaking of Lois, Andy asked, did you see that True Detective Lois Lane show pitch on Twitter? I did. And I've been saying for years that, they should do even if it was just a limited TV series with Amy Adams as Lois Lane, where she has something she has to investigate. I've been pitching that for a long time. This is nothing new for Rebecca Johnson. So I think that's a great idea. They should totally do it. I don't have a lot of faith that it's going to happen, but it definitely should. All right. So Orr continues by saying, quote, "Well, that and requiring the Man of Steel to rescue her from certain death at frequent intervals. There are times when it's hard to believe that this movie was made in 2016, unquote." Okay, lots to say here. First off, criticizing a Superman film that shows Superman saving Lois Lane is the weirdest criticism to me. That's part of the romance of Superman and Lois Lane. As a fan, you want to see Superman rescue Lois Lane. You want that to happen because it's part of their love story. You want to see, and it's exciting. It's action packed. And you want to see Superman do something heroic and action oriented. You want to see him use his abilities and his powers. It's a weird criticism to me. I wonder if Christopher Orr would write the same thing about Superman saving Lois Lane in the great helicopter scene from Superman the movie. Would he just absolutely hate the moment where she's like, "You got me. Well, who's got you?" Would he just like that as well? Because that's Superman saving Lois Lane. I guarantee you he probably loves that scene. That's my guess. I'm making an assumption about him, but I think that he probably does. And that's no less romantic, that scene. It's a great scene from the late 1970s. Still holds up today because well, at least that aspect of Superman in the movie still holds up today. That's a whole other conversation. But I think that that's part of what makes the romance in that movie and the romance in Batman v Superman sing, is that he's doing things to save her. What Mr. Orr also leaves out of this criticism is that Lois Lane actually saves Superman multiple times in Batman v Superman. Multiple times, not just once, multiple times. She steps in front of a crazed Batman with a kryptonite spear about to kill Superman. She actually saves him from being murdered by Batman. She pulls Superman out of the water and rescues him from drowning. She throws the kryptonite away when she knows it could be harmful to Superman. And she even goes after Lex Luthor, who is framing Superman for terrible events that happen around the globe. It's a worldwide threat that Lex Luthor is doing, which included a bombing at the Capitol building. So Lois Lane is a boss in Batman v Superman. She's doing a lot of stuff. She's getting rescued, but she's also doing some rescuing as well. It's interesting to me that he doesn't mention that at all in this review when he makes that claim. He makes it seem so sexist and so passe. It's not progressive, but she saves him many, many times. So that's a little strange. Okay, so just gonna stop and take some questions from the chat. Jet says, "Just seeing your streaming, what I miss?" Well, Jet, I don't know if you know the premise of what we're doing here, or what I'm doing here, and y'all are kind of with me, is that I'm going to read through all of the Rotten Tomatoes top critics negative reviews of Batman v Superman. The ones that I looked at 38. I don't know if there are any more now. I'll have to look and see if they got added after the time that I looked at them. But I did look through 38 reviews, so I'm committing to looking at 38 reviews, one per week, every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to go through it and talk about it because I think it would be a good experiment to see if these reviews were worth destroying an entire franchise of films over. So we're going to do it, and we're going to try to do it civilly and with kindness, just asking questions and just trying to analyze the things that are within the review. So that's what we're doing here. And thank you for joining me. Let's see. Chubby Teddy Monster Productions says Amy Adams had a vital role as Lois. What did he let's see. Yeah, so yeah, I mean a vital role in Batman v Superman. And also, this is a good point that Chubby Teddy Monster Productions makes. Lois Lane made me cringe until I read the comics and Amy Adams was playing her. I agree. When I was a high school student, I remember sitting in French class arguing with people about Lois Lane and how dumb she was. I thought she was dumb when I was probably like a sophomore in high school. And I remember having that issue. And then later on in my life, I started reading comics, and I started watching things like Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, which gave me a better perspective of Lois Lane. And then also Amy Adams' Lois Lane, Lois Lane removed all of the negative things that I didn't like about Lois Lane. All of the things that I really disliked about the character are not present in Amy Adams's portrayal, which is why she is my favorite. So Cole asks, and I probably wouldn't use this word, but aren't most of these hostile reviews essentially Disney shills? It's a good question to ask, and we'll get into some of that because I did do some statistical analysis. Not a lot. I'm not a mathematician, but I did sort of look at how many times Marvel was mentioned in these reviews, and so comparing that, because this will come up quite a bit in these reviews. So I think it's fair to say that if they bring up Marvel, they could perhaps be more of an MCU fan. It's just something it's a leap you take, I guess, but it does come up quite a bit in these reviews. So we'll take a look at those when they get here. Okay. So going back to Orr's review, he writes, quote, "As for Lois's heartfelt question, I just don't know if it's possible for you to love me and be you." That's a quote from the film. Orr says, I would refer her to Larry Niven's dispositive 1969 essay, Man of Steel, Woman of Kleenex. And you can actually read this review if you click on Orr's review in the video description. He has it linked inside the review, so you can actually look at Man of Steel, Woman of Kleenex. I think it's unnecessary for this to come up, that he would even include this in the review. It's not part of the film, other than he's trying to tie it to that scene with Lois in the bathtub. So I'm not exactly sure why he brings it up at all. It's actually, if you read it, it's extremely juvenile. I don't know that if I was going to write a professional critique of a film, I don't know that I would want that associated. And this is just me. Maybe I'm a prude, but I wouldn't want that associated with my thoughts on the film. So I think it's a little strange that he calls this the dispositive essay. I mean, it's very thorough. It's the Man of Steel, Woman of Kleenex review is very thorough. But so if he means dispositive, does he mean that the essay settles the issue about Superman and Lois Lane's relationship? Because tell that to anybody writing a Superman story today. If we had to adhere to that essay, there would be no stories about Superman and Lois Lane. So we'd run out of stories to tell and stories to read. So I sure hope it's not dispositive. Let's see if I can. Cole makes a point to say some of these reviews were directly, indirectly on Disney's payroll. There's reason to think those reviews are paid hit jobs carried out about basically by mercenaries. It's possible. I'm not saying it's not possible. I know there are. I have heard some reviewers confess that they've done things like written a review about, say, The Last Jedi that was a great review. It was very positive, and just praising that film to the highest heavens, even if they didn't want to. Even if they thought it was, I heard a reviewer on a podcast confess that he had written a review about The Last Jedi that was praising the film, even though he thought it was no good. So I know that exists. It does happen. So it is, it does sort of make me a little bit skeptical sometimes. But I try to, when I'm going through these reviews, I'm going to make every effort to just be open-minded and believe that this person, these are his thoughts and what he's wanting to say about the film. So that's kind of where I'm coming from in looking at these. So I'm not going to assume that they were paid by Disney or that they were trying to sync the movie. I don't know that for a fact. So I'm just going to go on the assumption that this is the words and the genuine thoughts from the reviewer. So I'm actually glad you brought that up, so we could kind of establish that as we continue to go on. All right, so Orr continues to say, quote, "And when it comes to Diana Prince, aka Wonder Woman, and played by Gal Gadot, over the course of 2.5 hours, we learned precisely nothing about her other than she fought in World War I, became disillusioned with mankind's senseless cruelty, has now reappeared 100 years later with a taste for high-end couture, and displays large, strategically selected expanses of bare skin. She reserves her famous red and blue one piece for the final act," unquote. So in my count, those were 5 things mentioned. So he says we learn precisely nothing about her. accept all of those things we learned about her. So I just wanted to bring that up. So let's keep going. All right. Orr says, quote, which brings us to Batman Bruce Wayne, Batman/Bruce Wayne, played with grumpy intensity and poor shaving habits. That's a pretty good joke. I'll give you that. By Ben Affleck. The idea of the clash between him and Superman. Is that grammatically correct to say him and Superman? I don't know. We'll go back to that. I don't know. Somebody let me know if you would maybe put Superman and him. Well, I don't know. I would probably reword that sentence. That's kind of a weird sentence. He says the idea of the clash between him and Superman is loosely lifted from Frank Miller's seminal 1986 comic series, The Dark Knight Returns. In that telling, Batman was a bitter 55-year-old super retiree whose vigilante methods were of such concern to the U.S. government that it enlisted Superman to rein him in. This time around, however, the roles are mostly inverted, with Superman as the potential threat to order. A U.S. senator, played by Holly Hunter, pops up periodically to raise this question, and Batman the potential remedy, unquote. Aside from the grumpy intensity comment, which I guess that's a negative, but isn't Bruce supposed to be kind of grumpy and intense in this story? That's a weird critique. Like, why would you criticize a character or an actor for playing a character when that's how they're supposed to be played in the story? That's a weird critique to me. But other than that, I actually appreciate this paragraph. There's an explanation of the storytelling connection to Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns and how it includes Senator Finch's character in the mix. That bit in the review actually could potentially educate the reader about something they may not have known before and added value to their experience with the film. Some people reading this may not know about the comics and the connection to Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns. So this, I think, actually adds value to the reader. So I appreciate this this part of the review. Let's see. Andy says, who is complaining about Bruce's shaving? I loved 5 o'clock Shadow Batman. Me too. I love his stubbly face underneath that cowl. I think it's quite attractive. So I will say that. I think it really adds to the character. And Ben Affleck, let's just be real. He looks great in Batman v Superman. These are facts I'm talking about. So I agree with that comment as well. Let's see. Mask of Shy answered my question from the chat earlier. He says, or Mask of Shy, I'm sorry if I misgendered. I hope I don't know. Sometimes I don't know with usernames. But Mask of Shy says, quote, it's pretentious because they have a preconceived notion that Superman is to be a escapist character who teaches, an escapist character who teaches a clear moral message and with friendly tone. So maybe it's a bit of BVS's story fault, which by design was meant to create an uncomfortable setting for Clark and Bruce to barely interact. Let's see. And Mask of Shy continues to say to that, add Zack's minimalistic, subtle treatment of Bruce and Clark's development, creating for them an illusion that BVS had to be fun, but Zack purposely took away that fun that they were promised. So thank you for expanding on your thought about why the reviewers may thought the film was pretentious. So that's a good answer to that question. Let's see. Chubby Teddy Monster Productions asks, Rebecca, do you think that Jeff Johns was involved in the negative response from the critics? From my understanding, he was disappointing. His Superman script was shot down by WB. There's no way to know that. I have no idea what his involvement was about that. I just know that I've seen featurettes where Jeff Johns talks about the story and he seems to like the story in those featurettes. So I have no idea. The only thing I do know is that when the bad reviews came out, the cast got asked about it in those interviews, which I thought was really classless and disrespectful. But we'll get there at another time. Maybe 38 weeks from now. So we'll get back to that. Yeah. So, all right, let's keep going into Orr's review. He continues to say, quote, but following the initial loss of life at Wayne Enterprises, Batman's motivations become vague, bordering on incomprehensible. All right, we'll keep going. The closest he comes to articulating them is when he explains to his butler Alfred, now played by Jeremy Irons, in a perhaps inevitable passing of the generational torch from Michael Caine, he has the power to wipe out the human race. And if we think there's even a 1% chance that he's our enemy, we have to treat it as an absolute certainty. And Orr says this may be the most ostentatiously, he loves the word ostentatious. Ostentatious, I mean, it's a great word. I'm not going to say it's not a great word, but maybe you shouldn't use it multiple times in the same review. This may be the most ostentatiously shoddy logic deployed by a theoretically brilliant character in recent movie history, unquote. Okay. So I completely disagree that Batman's motivations were vague and incomprehensible. They're actually some of the most well thought out parts of the film. Even in the theatrical release, you know exactly why Bruce Wayne has an issue with Superman and why he feels the need that he has to kill Superman. Like it's clear as day. I don't know why any of that would be confusing. Then I guess another question I would ask about this is, why is the scene between Alfred and Bruce shoddy logic? I would love to hear an expansion on that claim, but there is none. There is no expansion on it. There's no explanation of the comment. There's nothing to back that up. So even if I wanted to know what he thought was shoddy logic about it, I don't get to know. I don't get to get into that thought. So that's a shame. I would really love to know why he thought that was shoddy logic. You know, tell me why you think the way you do. So Orr goes on to say, quote, "Make no mistake, Batman doesn't want merely to limit Superman's super prerogatives or to come up with a contingency plan in case he goes rogue, or even to confine him somewhere. He wants, quite explicitly, to kill Superman." Again, in the proper hands, such as Frank Miller's 30 years ago, the idea of a quasi-insane Batman might bear interesting fruit. But Snyder's Batman is all over the map, suave and rational one moment and snarling, belligerent threats the next. At one point, he taunts Superman like an overly theatrical WWF heel, which that's a pretty funny joke. I'm gonna give him that. He taunts him with, "Tell me, do you bleed? You will." What has Superman done to merit this degree of hatred? Leveled another city? Killed the president? Declared war on puppies? Nope. Alien monster that he is, he's messed up the Batmobile. Unquote. Wow. This entire paragraph is unfair to Bruce's character and doesn't provide any real analysis to what is going on with the journey that he's going on in the film. Bruce Wayne knows that Superman was involved with the destruction of the Wayne Foundation building and the death of his friend Jack. Bruce Wayne met an orphan girl in the rubble of Metropolis who had lost her mother. One of Bruce Wayne's employees becomes an amputee during the Battle of Metropolis. Bruce Wayne was on the ground with emergency workers to save people. Bruce Wayne has a nightmare in which Superman reaches in to tear his heart out, and he gets a visit from the Flash telling him to fear him, which he takes as a reference to Superman. Looking back on it, we think is probably about Darkseid. And Bruce Wayne sees the explosion at the Capitol building live on television, which kills a lot of people and destroys an iconic symbol of government, American government. None of this is mentioned, and maybe he doesn't want to spoil it, but none of it is mentioned in the review. And he says that his Batman is all over the map. He's all over the map, and he doesn't know why Batman would want to kill Superman. Just doesn't understand it. I personally don't understand how you would miss all of those things and say that you don't understand why he wants to kill Superman. Bruce Wayne experiences a lot of things that would drive him to be, a crazed character in the film because of everything that he's experienced. So it's a real shame that none of that is mentioned in the review, because I think it really gives a substantiation to what the character is going through in the film, and it's conveniently left out of the review. Let's see if there's anything else in the chat people want to say. Okay, let's see. Chubby Teddy Monster Production says, "Hey, Rebecca, this has been awesome. As you know, I have a ton of respect and love for your vantage point on things. Yeah. If you got a balance, get out of here. I know it's gonna be long. We'll try to wrap it up here in a little bit. But thank you for joining me. Yeah. So Mask of Shy says, reviewer, I have a complaint. Movie Here's the context. Yeah, so this is something we'll probably talk about as we continue to go through these reviews, that there are things that are conveniently left out that would actually probably make somebody very interested in the film if they knew about them. All right, so continuing on, Orr says, quote, "I will not go further into the plot of the movie, in part because Snyder has made an explicit plea that reviews avoid spoilers, and in part because the screenplay by Chris Terrio and David S. Goyer is a tangled mess of awkwardly entwined storylines," unquote. Okay, so they're a tangled mess of awkwardly entwined storylines. Why? Why are they a tangled mess of awkwardly entwined storylines? I don't know. He doesn't say. I guess we'll just have to take his word for it. His word is settled. But, you know, even if you didn't want to spoil anything, couldn't you give me some explanation for why you would say that? Because I think the script is actually awesome. When you actually go through the film, it's really well written. But I would be open to learning why it's a tangled mess of awkwardly entwined storylines. But I don't get an answer about that. Orr continues to say, quote, "Even on questions as straightforward as whether this Batman is a continuation of Nolan's Dark Knight or a reboot, this movie seems unable to decide," unquote. This is why I want y'all to click on that link in the video description, just so you know this is a real review. This is a real review from a professional movie critic writing unclear whether or not Batman v Superman is a continuation of Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. This is a real part of the review. I just want y'all to know that. Like, I'm not making this up. What in the world is he even talking about here? Why would this ever be a thought someone had? Christian Bale's not in BVS. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is not in this film. Michael Caine's not in it. Alfred's actually played by a different actor, Jeremy Irons. I think the film actually makes it pretty clear that it's not a continuation or a reboot of Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. It's a weird critique. So I'm just going to leave that there. Or continues on. On the one hand, it presents us yet again with the robbery murder of young Bruce Wayne's parents, perhaps the scene in all popular cinema that least needed to be portrayed anew. This time, though, his mother's pearls tumble to the ground in slow motion. On the other, it presumes that we already know all about Alfred, the Batcave, and so on, unquote. This critique seems to be upset that the Wayne murders are shown again, but then doesn't seem to appreciate that the film trusts you to fill in the Batman gaps. And my question is, can you have that both ways? Can you make those same statements and be consistent? This reviewer also mentioned The Dark Knight Returns earlier in the same review, but doesn't point out here that the opening sequence is almost a frame-by-frame depiction of the Wayne murders in the comic book story, which actually separates it and sets it apart from all of the other depictions of the Wayne murders that have been put to film. And continuing that thought, the Wayne murders in BVS are different from how the Waynes are murdered in Batman 89 from Tim Burton or the Dark Knight trilogy. There's no Jack Napier, there's no opera, and it's actually more faithful to the comics. So I think it's a little strange that he talks up The Dark Knight Returns as something that he seems to know about, but then he doesn't talk about that here with the Wayne murders. Let's see. Mask of Shy says this guy is reviewing the theatrical cut, which, to be fair, had some weird editing at times. Yeah, I think that's fair to remember that all these reviews that we're going to be talking about are going to be in response to the theatrical cut of the film, which I still think is a pretty good film, even though there's 30 minutes missing from what was intended. But yeah, so that is something to keep in mind when we talk about these comments. Okay, Orr goes on to say, as its subtitle announces, Batman v Superman is set up for Snyder's upcoming Justice League movie in conscious apery of the world building that Marvel Studios has been undertaking for almost a decade, unquote. So if you're curious about the definitions of conscious apery is basically mimicking or copying. My question then is, how does one claim that BVS is so grim and serious, but then say it's trying to copy the MCU? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So Orr goes on to say, quote, "But whereas Marvel produced 5 superhero features before assembling its heroes in the Avengers, Warner Brothers had no such patience with its DC properties," unquote. So my question about this critique is why is taking a different approach a negative critique when previously Orr claimed BVS was aping the MCU? Why wouldn't you applaud that they had a different approach to the world building and the setup to something similar to the Marvel Cinematic Universe? It's weird. It's like they want it to be like the MCU, but then they get mad that it's not. So I don't know where you come down on that. It's interesting that in Orr's review, he writes, quote, Justice League Part 1 is due out next year, unquote. So this is old. This is back in the day when there were supposed to be, it was supposed to be a Justice League two-parter. So you know that this is before a lot of things. There's a lot of history in this review. All right, so continuing on, Orr writes, quote, nowhere is this impatience more evident than in a remarkably lame narrative shortcut in which Bruce Wayne happens upon a metahuman supercut of footage that introduces Wonder Woman, The Flash, Aquaman, and Cyborg in the course of approximately 2 minutes. Glad that's out of the way, guys, unquote. Hey, look, Christopher Orr, I'll give you this one. Is definitely a way to tie things to Justice League, and it was used as a shortcut to do so, and that probably could have been handled better. Look, that's one of I would say that's probably one of my critiques about BBS. I get it. I think that this is a fair one. I'll give this one to you, Christopher Orr. Let's see. Then he says, quote, such shoddiness is characteristic of the entire script, unquote. This I will not give to you. I don't think that's fair. The entire script, come on now. That's ridiculously unfair and doesn't take into consideration how the film is crafted, what the dialogue does to further storylines and the character journeys, and how everything ties together in the end. Even the theatrical version of the film does a pretty good job of tying all of the story together, even though we all know the ultimate cut is definitely the superior version. Let's see. Yeah, Andy, speaking of which, says the ultimate cut is clearly the superior one, but I think the theatrical cut got way too much criticism than it deserved. I agree with that. I think on the first watch, I probably would have said, yeah, the editing is a little wonky. But as I continued to watch it, because I saw it 15 times in the theater, because I had that ultimate ticket, so I could go whenever and wherever I wanted to, is that it got better with rewatch, not just the editing, the story, the characters, the themes, all of that, continued to get better the more I rewatched it. But yeah, so I definitely think it got way too much criticism than it deserved. I agree with that. Okay, continuing on. Orr says, quote, though there are several scenes illustrating the extent of Superman's super speed, he never seems to use it when it's most needed. For example, as he stands around watching Batman prepare to hurl what he already knows to be a deadly kryptonite grenade, unquote. Okay, this is actually an effort to critique something that is actually presented on screen. This is the kind of stuff, even if I don't like it, you're actually critiquing it. You're actually looking at the story and talking about moments in the film and offering why you don't think it's any good. This is what I would want out of a review. But my question about this is how is Superman supposed to know what kryptonite is and that it's even deadly to him? He has no prior experience with it, right? It's not even created until after the Battle of Metropolis. They do have a little bit of the atmosphere in Man of Steel when he's on the Black Zero and he falls to his knees and he's bleeding. But there's no actual green kryptonite until after the Battle of Metropolis, when they fish it out of the Indian Ocean, and Lex Luthor gets his big green, a piece of green rock that he puts in LexCorp, and Batman then goes and steals it. So how would he even know about that? He doesn't even encounter green kryptonite until the final fight with Batman at the end of the film. As far as I know, only Lex Luthor, Bruce Wayne, and the American government know that green kryptonite can even harm a Kryptonian because they did experiments with Zod's body. So I don't think that's fair to Superman. How would he have known that? So if anybody has any answer to that, let me know in the chat or in the comments section. If Orr has any validity to his actual critique of one part of the film. I don't think it's correct, but if somebody has any alternative thoughts, let me know. All right, so Orr continues to say, quote, one crucial plot twist depends entirely on the coincidence of two characters having relatives with the same first name. This is the Martha moment he's talking about. Orr continues to say, though the moment is intended to be one of profound emotion, there was open laughter in the screening I attended, unquote. Okay, so some questions about this, because I happen to love the Martha moment. Just throwing that out there, kind of being transparent about it. My question is: so if people laugh at it, it's bad. Is that how is that? How does it make it bad because people laugh at it? Even if nobody laughed at it, would it still be bad? It would be nice to have a genuine effort that's made in this review at this section to actually analyze the scene, and explain why it's bad, not just because the people you saw it with laughed at it. I don't know that that's a fair critique. I think you should maybe explain why you think it's bad. So that to me is a little strange. We're going to get back to audiences further down in this review, so we'll come back. Hold on to that thought. Or continues to say, and the biggest twist of all is one that was rendered implausible by a vision of the future that Batman had already experienced. A vision, incidentally, that will be utterly incomprehensible to all but the most devout DC fans, unquote. And you know what? I'm gonna give it up to you on this one. I think that's a fair critique about the nightmare sequence. It was inserted into Batman v Superman after the fact to try to push towards Justice League and future films with the nightmare sequence. So I think that's a fair critique of, somebody just watching Batman v Superman with no context about what was going to come or what was intended. I think that's a fair critique. I think if things though had played out as they were intended and the films that were supposed to come after came after, I think people would look back on what happened with the nightmare sequence in Batman v Superman and be like, wow, they really thought this out. They had this all planned. So I think it was intended to be something more. And it would have been really cool, I think, if it had been done in the way it was intended. But because it wasn't, it now looks, well, I guess now that we have the Snyder Cut, we know that kind of helps with that a little bit. But yeah, so I think it would have been reflected back on more positively if it had been done well after the fact. And so I think it's interesting that he previously mentioned if an audience thought it was something, it was definitely that thing. So it's interesting. When I first saw Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, I saw it with fans. I saw it at a fan screening. And so it was interesting to me that after it was over, the guys I sat next to in the theater immediately recognized that nightmare sequence as a nod to Injustice. So some people got a hold of it and thought it was great. So if the audience thinks it's great, that means it's great, right? I mean, if an audience thinks something's bad, that means it's bad. So if an audience thinks it's great, it must be great. I guess that's how you rationalize that. So I'm just applying the same logic that Christopher Orr has already established in his review. Okay, so and continuing on, he writes, quote, Affleck is solid as Batman, at least insofar as the script allows him to be, unquote. My question to this is, what does that even mean? If Ben Affleck's performance is solid, then his performance is solid. You can say that the writing isn't good for his character, but that doesn't impact his performance. If he gives a good performance and the writing stinks, that just means he's a really good actor. So that's a kind of a strange critique to me, because I've seen lots of actors who have bad scripts or bad writing who elevate the scene because their performance is so good. They rise above the bad writing. And so I think that's what he's trying to say in here, but it seems like he says that, well, the writing is bad. So he almost was solid, but it's a very contradictory thought in the review. Is very strange. Okay, and then he continues on. He's going through and taking a look at all the actors now. And he writes, quote, Cavill, though, again fails to sell the Man of Steel persuasively, unquote. Two questions. Why? How? He ends it there. He doesn't continue to explain why he thinks that Cavill failed to sell the Man of Steel persuasively. I would like to know why did he not sell Superman for you? It's not explained in the review. Or also says, quote, and Godot makes almost no impression at all in her underwritten role, unquote. No impression at all. Did y'all see Batman v Superman in theaters? Because I did. I saw it 15 times, and every time I saw it with an audience, there was cheering that went on when Wonder Woman comes down, saves Batman. She's got the iconic bracelet iconography there, and she's awesome. The electric cello comes in. Almost no impression at all. That didn't make any impression at all on Christopher Orr. That's amazing to me. Wow. And let's go back to the audience logic. If the audience thought that Wonder Woman's entrance into the film was awesome and cheered for it, then I guess it should be great. I guess that should be great, and we're going to take that into consideration. So that's how we're going to go with that. So Orr also goes on to say, he says, but it's Eisenberg who really stands out in the film, and not in a good way. I've been a fan of the actor dating back to 2002's Roger Dodger, but his twerpy take on Lex Luthor is almost unwatchable. Petulant, melodramatic, hyperactive, and entitled. He comes across like an improbable and thoroughly unappetizing okay, blend of Tracy Flick and the Joker, unquote. Again, I have two questions. Why? How? How is he like the Joker? How is he like Tracy Flick? It's been a long time since I've watched Election. I very much disliked that film, but I watched it a long time ago. Maybe it deserves a rewatch to see if I feel the same. But I would not have connected Tracy Flick to Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. So I have a lot of questions about why is he making this comparison? He doesn't give any explanation for these descriptions or these comparisons. So that's something I wish I could learn about, and he doesn't write it in the review. And then he also calls Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor's portrayal as petulant, melodramatic, hyperactive, and entitled. And I have two questions about this critique. Is that could that have been what Jesse Eisenberg was going for? Maybe that's what he was playing. Maybe that was his intention. Just a thought. I'm just asking a question. And also, why are petulant, melodramatic, hyperactive, and entitled? Why are those characteristics bad for a villain? Shouldn't those be somewhat? I imagine some villains are like that. So I think it's perfectly fine for a villain to have those characteristics. So let's see if people in the chat have some thoughts about these sections. Let's see. Okay, so John Wonders says the Joker is either an anarchist or a monster. Jesse has none of those vibes. Yeah, he seems to Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. He wants to focus in on his target. He's not like the Joker where like anything goes. I'm just, I'm anarchy. I'm just chasing cars, whatever. I'm just I don't have plans. But Jesse Eisenberg is his Lex Luthor is like, you know what? I really dislike Superman. I'm gonna go after Superman, and that's his goal. That's his target. And so he's actually that's almost an ordered kind of vibe. So he's definitely different from Joker in that respect. So thank you for sharing those thoughts, John, because we don't get those thoughts from the reviewer of this review making that claim. So gotta figure out what he's talking about. He continues on saying, quote, one almost wonders whether Eisenberg's mocking send-up of film reviewers in the New Yorker last December was intended as a bit of critical inoculation. Ultimately, though, the central flaw of Batman v Superman is Snyder's trademark tone, which alternates between angry and maudlin with a little in between. Almost the entire film seems to be set at night, as if it were taking place in Mordor or perhaps Anchorage in December, unquote. I really like that mention of Anchorage. I'm getting a little personality out of Christopher Orr here. I would love a little bit more of that. But it's interesting, this whole paragraph, and specifically the part where he's talking about the scenes set at night. He has to write almost in there because he knows that claim for the entire film being set at night is untrue. He knows that's the case because he watched the film. So just to back up my claim that I would like to rebut the idea that almost the entire film is set at night, I've provided some screenshots. We're gonna look at some scenes set in the daytime. We're gonna see exactly how much of it was set in the daytime. We're going to go through these really quickly. So we know that the opening sequence with the Wayne funeral was set during the day. It's an entire sequence that takes place during the day. It's mixed in with nighttime with the Wayne murders, and we'll talk about that. Also, the flashback to the Battle of Metropolis, that takes place during the day. We also get some daytime shots in the sequence where Lex Luthor's people find the kryptonite. So beautiful stuff there. Lots of good color. Also, the sequence with Lois Lane in Africa is entirely set during the day. Even when she goes home to her apartment, set during the day. It's kind of rainy, but it's set during the day. It's not nighttime. When we meet Lex Luthor, that's happening during the day. We also get to see some daylight time when Wallace Keefe goes to the Superman statue. Speaking of that area of Metropolis, we also got some daytime scenes with a sequence where Lex goes to the scout ship to kind of investigate the Kryptonian technology. Also, when Lois Lane is at the Daily Planet and she's trying to convince Perry to give her a cushy seat on the plane, that's during the day. We get some daylight stuff and an entire sequence of Alfred and Bruce talking at Bruce's swanky little lakeside house. We also get some daytime with Mercy and Wallace going to see Lex Luthor, and he gives Wallace a new chair. And we also get a lot of daytime scenes with the Daily Planet with Perry White. We got some daylight there. Even with the nightmare sequence, that takes place during the day. You would think that maybe that would be during the night because the world has been taken over by Darkseid, but that's actually during the day. We get Lois Lane and the sort of the sequence leading up to the Capitol bombing. It's rainy again, but that's happening during the day. There's also a scene in an entire sequence where Lois and Swanwick are talking about the Lex Luthor, the LexCorp technology in the bullet. That takes place during the day. When Superman goes to the Capitol building to testify, that's happening during the day. When Clark goes up to his Fortress of Solitude, if you will, he sees Jonathan Kent there during the day. And there's a whole sequence at the end with the funeral of Superman, or the funerals of Superman and Clark Kent happening during the day. It's weird to me that this would be somebody's critique. Though I will address the scenes set at night. So here are some of the sequences in the theatrical version, which, or of course, would have reviewed at the time, that we know are set at night. And there are some other sequences that are indoors, like the Underground Fight Club and Bruce and Diana at the gala. We don't know for sure. We can't confirm that those are set at night. They're probably set at night, though, but we don't know for sure. So I'll just mention those. So here's some scenes and sequences that are set at night. The Wayne murders at the beginning, Batman's introduction, Lex Luthor's fundraiser at his fancy place, and then Batman and Superman's first encounter with the Batmobile, Batman stealing the kryptonite from LexCorp, Clark as Superman getting advice from Martha on the Kent farm, Superman visiting Lois Lane in her DC hotel room, Martha Wayne's kidnapping, all the way through the big showdown between Batman and Superman, and then the final fight with Doomsday. That's all set at night. So what are the commonalities of these sequences set at night? A lot of them involve Batman, his entire brand is that he operates at night. He's called the Dark Knight. And other scenes involving nighttime activities like fancy parties or characters doubting themselves happen during nighttime sequences. So my question is, is there a reason for that? Do filmmakers and writers take storytelling into consideration when deciding if they're going to set a scene during the day or the night? Could the night scenes depict more serious stakes? Does the rainfall provide metaphors for tears or sadness? What about the lightning strikes or the storms? Could they be representative of fighting and anger? Could the even just visually, could the night setting allow for Wonder Woman's lasso and the effects surrounding Doomsday to be brighter and more visual? Could it just be based on, hey, we need this to be seen? It's not going to be as effective during the day. If it's at night, it'll come through better. These are all questions that I think reviewers should ask. These are questions I want to know. These are questions that I ask when I look at a scene, because if you set a scene in day versus night, you're choosing that. It's not just happening. You're making that choice. So they obviously have a reason why they made them set at night. And so I think I consider the job, if I'm a reviewer, if I'm reviewing something, that's my job, to ask that question. Why is this set at night? Maybe there's a reason for it. Also, I just wonder if Christopher Orr has ever watched film noir. Would he give the same criticism that most of the film is set at night? A lot of those movies are set at night. I hope that's okay with him. I hope he's not too traumatized by that. But all in all, I say all of this to say that criticizing a film for being set at night, to me, is pretty strange, especially when no thought is given in the review for why that might be the case. So I think you could pull a few more threads and really have some thoughtful, and thought-provoking analysis there. Let's see. Let's keep going. So we're almost to the end. So thanks for everybody who's stuck around with me here. He ends the review with, quote, "And Hans Zimmer's clamorous, punishing score was still reverberating in my feelings for hours after the movie was over. In the end, Batman v Superman is a tiresome, ill-tempered film and one too lazy even to earn its dismal outlook," unquote. I do like the mention here of the fillings. I'm getting to know Christopher Orr a little bit. He's got fillings, so he must have some cavities, man. You need to brush your teeth and floss. I mean, I need to do it too. It's something we all need to remember to do. But I'm getting to know Christopher Orr a little bit. There's a little personality. I like it when his personality comes through here. I get to know him as a reviewer a little bit. He's not just saying everything that everybody else is going to say. Maybe other people are not going to mention their feelings in the review. So this is a personal, a little bit of Christopher Orr coming through. So I like that. If you're wondering about the definition of clamorous, it means noisily insistent. So he's saying that Hans Zimmer's musical score is noisily insistent and is punishing and just reverberating his feelings. My question is that indicative of the entire score, or is that just in certain parts? Is that just with Batman's theme and maybe even the nightmare sequence when the entire world is taken over by Darkseid? Is there a reason it might be a little loud and clamorous and punishing? Maybe there's a choice that's made by Hans Zimmer and Chunky XL for that. Maybe there's a reason for that. He also doesn't mention the quieter and the more emotional moments in the film in regards to the score. You get that with the opening sequence with the Wayne murders, that beautiful, beautiful lie track. Even during Superman's death, where you hear those really sad choral moments. A lot of that is just, it's beautiful and heart-wrenching and emotional. And he doesn't mention that here. He just takes issue with the clamorous parts, the punishing parts, but he doesn't mention that the entire film score is not like that. So I think it's strange that you would critique a film score for having a punishing sound when the entire storyline is that you have an angry and vengeful Batman, and you have a foreshadowing of Darkseid taking control of Earth and Superman falling under the anti-life equation. That seems fitting to me. I don't see that as a critique or a bad thing. I think it's actually doing what it's supposed to do. The last sentence of his review, I think, this is my opinion here, it's entirely unearned because none of it is actually explained by anything of its substance, and there is virtually no actual analysis to back up anything that was written. So I have a hard time understanding how one writes a review saying that Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice has a dismal outlook when Bruce Wayne has an entire ending monologue about how men are still good and how humanity needs to be better. How is that a dismal outlook? That seems pretty positive and uplifting and hopeful to me. So I guess as we wrap up here with this review, I guess you could say this review features a lot of ostentatious hand-wringing. So that's how I'm going to wrap up this review. Let's see. It looks like we do have some chats here. Snyder, I'm sorry if I can't pronounce your username, Zingingly. I totally butchered that. I'm sorry. But this user says, Snyder has said multiple times that he's interested in the why of things. The reviewers should have had the same attitude when reviewing movies. Yes, I think that not only does that go for Batman v Superman, I think that should go for all films, all film reviews and critiques. I think as reviewers and viewers, I think we should be asking those questions. That's how you get anything out of a film. And I find it more rewarding to do that, because filmmakers have, like the user said, Zack Snyder, wants to do certain things with the film. He has goals that he wants to achieve with it. So we should at least have the openness and the capacity to see if we can figure out why. Why do they make those choices? And I think as a small time content creator myself, and someone who likes to shoot, I would love it if even if somebody critiqued my stuff, if they gave me constructive feedback and they tried to understand what I was doing, I would find that immensely helpful. So I think the job of a reviewer could be really helpful to a filmmaker and could be an added bonus. Sometimes, unfortunately, I think that's not the case, but I think that is something that we could think about in terms of what the job of a reviewer is, and maybe what we should look for when we review things. So that may be some questions that we'll try to answer by the end of this 38-week live streaming goal. So stay tuned for that. Well, I think that is going to do it for this week's live stream and review and analysis about the review from the top critics of Rotten Tomatoes, specifically this week, Christopher Orr from The Atlantic. If you missed this live, if you're watching this back and you're not live, I hope you'll consider sharing your thoughts in the comment section below, and sharing what you think is a rebuttal to this review. And now I'm going to let voiceover Rebecca take it away and wrap up this live stream. If you would like to see more of these live streams, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel at youtube.com/duckmilkprod. If you'd like to keep in touch with me personally, you can follow me on Instagram at TheDerbyKid and on Vero at DerbyKid. You can hear my thoughts on the CW Supergirl TV series and all things Kara Zor-El over at Supergirl Radio by visiting supergirlradio.com, subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts, or subscribing to the DC TV Podcast YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/DCTV Podcasts. Also, please check out the Justice League Universe podcast for in-depth analysis on the DCEU films, including Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And before I go, I hope that this live stream video series will inspire you to think more critically and thoughtfully about film and storytelling. I'd like to leave you with this quote from C.S. Lewis's book titled An Experiment in Criticism. The truth is not that we need the critics in order to enjoy the authors, but that we need the authors to enjoy the critics. My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I love Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And I am publishing a series of videos exploring the reasons why I am such a fan of Zack Snyder's film. In this series, you'll find my thoughts on topics that matter to me, like Larry Fong's cinematography, character analysis on Lex Luthor and Lois Lane, the Christian imagery, what I find hopeful about the movie, and yes, I'll address the critical reception. So if you're interested in any of those topics, I hope you will get something out of this series and find out why Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice has had such a profound, heartfelt, and inspiring impact on my life.